Nesting data classes. Just like how data classes can be nested inside of lists, data classes can be nested inside of other data classes. This introduces some extra complexity, but can be quite helpful for organizing large complex objects and increasing reusability. The person class shown here depends on an address class for two of its fields. This allows us to cleanly separate the parts of an address from the parts of a person, both in our minds and in our code. When you print out the entire object, you can see that Ada has two different addresses inside. The order in which you define data classes matter. If you try running the code shown here, you will get an error on the second line of the definition of the person class. That definition is expecting the address class to already exist, so a name error occurs instead. The data classes must be defined before they can be referenced, at least in Python. When you have multiple levels of nested data classes, you still use attribute access to get data inside of the classes. However, you will have to chain the accesses together in order to get to the desired level. Imagine opening a box and finding another box inside, and then opening that box to find the value you are looking for. Each level of nested data class means another box. A temporary variable can help alleviate some of the ugliness of heavily nested classes. Assigning one part of the chained attribute access to a new variable allows you to name that expression and reuse it later. This is especially helpful if you are going to need to use the value stored inside multiple times. As you might have guessed by now, lists can also be nested inside of data classes. Lists are just another type, after all, so using them inside of a data class is not a big deal. The only part that might feel strange is how you access individual elements of the list. Notice how we have to combine the attribute access syntax with the list indexing syntax. All the same rules and operations apply that we have learned so far, they might just look a little funny at first. When you are designing your data classes, you have to stop and reflect on how much nesting you want. Breaking up complex data classes into smaller pieces can help make your code more reusable and more flexible, and can reduce your cognitive load. However, you also will have to do more levels of access, and it can be difficult to remember where things are. You need to learn to work with the brain that you have, and find an appropriate level of depth for the classes. In the example shown here, we see a person class that has a name field with a corresponding name class, rather than being directly a str. This makes no sense, since the name class only ends up with one field. But it might make sense if we were going to add some other fields, like first_name and last_name and nickname to the name field. Then we could reuse that structure across other classes that need complex names.